The scent of garlic and rosemary hung thick in the air of Stella's, mingling with the sharp tang of expensive cologne and cigar smoke that seemed to cling to everything in this part of town. My feet ached. A dull, persistent throb that had started 6 hours ago and now pulsed in rhythm with the classical music drifting from hidden speakers. I'd been on my feet since the lunch shift began, and now, deep into the dinner rush, my lower back screamed with every trip from kitchen to table. I was invisible here. That's what I'd learned in the 3 months since I'd started waiting tables at one of the most exclusive Italian restaurants in the city. The patrons, wealthy, powerful, dripping in diamonds and designer labels, looked through me as if I were made of glass. Sometimes I caught fragments of their conversations. Business deals worth millions, vacation homes in Tuscany, political connections that made my stomach turn. But mostly, I was just the girl who brought their food, refilled their wine, and disappeared back into the woodwork. Tonight was no different, or so I thought. The restaurant was packed, every table occupied by the kind of people who expected perfection and complained when they got anything less. My section was full, my notepad covered in scribbled orders, my apron stained with a splash of marinara sauce from when I'd bumped into Paolo in the kitchen. I was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep and the burnt coffee I'd gulped down during my break. I was clearing table 7, a couple who'd left their plates half full and their tip disappointingly light, when I heard it. A shift in the atmosphere, subtle but unmistakable. The low hum of conversation didn't stop exactly, but it changed, became more careful, more aware. I glanced toward the entrance and felt my breath catch. 3 men had entered, but only one commanded attention. He moved through the restaurant like he owned it, which, for all I knew, he might. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. The fabric looked like liquid shadow, perfectly tailored to his frame. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. All sharp angles and hard edges, except for his mouth, which curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. But it was his eyes that made my hands tremble as I stacked dirty plates. Even from across the room, I could feel the weight of them, dark and assessing, missing nothing. There was something predatory in the way he scanned the space, as if he were cataloging exits and threats with the ease of long practice. The 2 men flanking him were clearly security. One built like a wall, the other lean and alert, both watching the room with the same careful intensity as their boss. They moved in perfect synchronization, a practiced dance that spoke of years working together. Marco, the maitre d', practically tripped over himself rushing to greet them. I'd never seen him flustered before, but now his hands shook as he gestured toward the private section at the back, the area we reserved for VIPs who valued their privacy above all else. I turned away, focusing on my task. Not my business, not my concern. I had 4 more tables to check on, orders to deliver, and if I was lucky, maybe I'd get out of here before midnight. Sophia! I jumped, nearly dropping the stack of plates. Tony, the floor manager, appeared at my elbow, his face flushed. "You're covering the private section tonight." My stomach dropped. "But Angela called in sick. You're up." He was already walking away, leaving no room for argument. "Table 12. Don't screw it up." The private section. Of course. Because tonight hadn't been difficult enough already. I deposited the dirty dishes in the kitchen, ignoring Paolo's knowing look, and grabbed fresh linens and silverware. My hands were steady as I arranged everything perfectly. Years of practice had taught me to hide my nerves, but my heart hammered against my ribs as I approached table 12. Up close, he was even more intimidating. The soft lighting cast shadows across his features, making him look both younger and more dangerous. He'd removed his jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt that stretched across broad shoulders. A watch glinted at his wrist, understated but undoubtedly expensive. His hands rested on the table, long fingers drumming a quiet rhythm against the tablecloth. No rings, no visible scars, but there was something in the way he held himself. A coiled tension that suggested violence was never far from the surface. The 2 security men sat at a nearby table, close enough to intervene, but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. They didn't look at menus. They looked at doors, windows, the other diners, always watching. I approached with my practiced smile, the one that never quite reached my eyes, the one that said, "I'm here to serve you," and then disappear. "Good evening. Welcome to Stella's. My name is Sophia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." The words came automatically, smooth and professional. "Can I start you with something to drink?" He didn't look up immediately. Instead, he studied the wine list with the kind of intense focus most people reserved for important documents. When he finally raised his eyes to mine, I felt the impact like a physical blow. They were dark brown, almost black in the dim light, and completely unreadable. The Barolo, 2015. His voice was deep, carrying the faintest trace of an Italian accent. Not the manufactured kind some people adopted to sound sophisticated, but something real, embedded in his bones. Each word was carefully measured, as if he were accustomed to people hanging on every syllable. "Excellent choice." I scribbled the note, grateful for something to do with my hands. "And would you like to hear tonight's specials?" "No." The single word hung in the air between us. Not rude exactly, but absolute. Final. "Of course. I'll give you a few moments to review the menu." "I know what I want." He closed the menu without having opened it and looked at me expectantly. I poised my pen over the notepad, acutely aware of how his gaze tracked my movements. It wasn't sexual. At least I didn't think it was. More like he was studying me, cataloging details the way he'd cataloged the restaurant when he entered. "The osso buco. Tell Vincenzo to prepare it the way my grandmother made it. Slowly, with the veal shank falling off the bone, not the modern interpretation he's been serving lately." He paused, his eyes never leaving mine. "And tell him if he argues, he can explain himself to me personally." A chill ran down my spine. The casual way he said it, the absolute certainty that his demands would be met, the familiarity with which he spoke of our head chef by name, it all pointed to someone who wielded considerable power. I'll pass that along to the kitchen. See that you do." I turned to leave, eager to escape the suffocating intensity of his presence, when his voice stopped me. "And Sophia." I froze. Hearing my name in that deep, accented voice made something flutter in my chest. Part fear, part something I didn't want to examine too closely. "Yes? Make sure no one disturbs me unless I call for them. I have business to attend to." He pulled out a phone, one of several I noticed in his jacket pocket draped over the chair. And his attention shifted away from me as if I'd ceased to exist. I fled to the kitchen, my heart pounding. Vincenzo's face turned red when I delivered the message, but after a moment of muttering in Italian, he nodded curtly and began barking orders to his sous chefs. Whatever Tony had said about not screwing this up clearly applied to everyone. The Barolo was poured with ceremony, the bottle brought to the table and presented like a sacred offering. I poured exactly the right amount, my hand steady despite my nerves, and retreated before he could say anything else. The dinner rush continued around me, but I found myself hyper-aware of table 12. Between serving my other tables, I snuck glances at him. He made 2 phone calls, both conducted in rapid Italian too quick for me to follow. His face remained impassive throughout, but something about his posture, the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened, suggested the conversations weren't pleasant. When his food arrived, I carried the plate myself, not trusting anyone else with it. The osso buco looked perfect, the meat glistening, the risotto beneath it creamy and fragrant. Vincenzo had outdone himself, clearly unwilling to face whatever consequences came with disappointing this man. I set the plate down carefully, making sure everything was positioned just so. "Your osso buco, sir, prepared according to your specifications." He looked at the dish, then at me, and for the first time, something flickered in those dark eyes. Not quite approval, but perhaps a fraction less coldness. "Good." I should have left. Should have returned to my other tables, to the endless cycle of orders and dirty plates and forced smiles. But something made me linger, just for a heartbeat too long. "Will there be anything else?" "Not from you." The words stung more than they should have. I was used to being dismissed, used to being invisible, but somehow his casual dismissal felt different, sharper. I nodded, schooling my features into professional neutrality, and turned to go. That's when I saw it. Table 8. The couple who'd been there when he arrived. The woman was holding up her phone, angled toward table 12, clearly trying to sneak a photograph. My blood ran cold. I didn't know who he was. Not really. But I knew enough. The security, the deference, the way everyone walked on eggshells around him. This was not a man who would appreciate having his picture taken without permission. The smart thing would have been to ignore it, to let whatever happened happen and keep my head down. But I'd never been particularly good at doing the smart thing. I crossed to table 8 in 3 quick strides, positioning myself between their table and his, blocking the shot. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice pleasant but firm. "But we have a strict no photography policy in the private section." "For the privacy of all our guests." The woman's face flushed. "I was just taking a picture of your meal, I'm sure." I smiled, but there was steel beneath it. "Perhaps you'd like to visit our main dining room where photography is permitted?" Her companion, husband, boyfriend, grabbed her wrist, pushing the phone down. He'd seen the security guards shift in their seats, seen the way one of them had half risen, hand moving toward something beneath his jacket. No, he stammered. "We were just leaving, actually. Check, please." I processed their payment with practiced efficiency, my mind racing. Had he noticed? Had he seen what almost happened? When I finally gathered the courage to glance toward table 12, I found him watching me. Not angry, not grateful, just watching, with that same intense focus that made me feel like a butterfly pinned to a board. My hands trembled as I checked on my other tables, going through the motions automatically. The restaurant began to empty as the night wore on, families and couples departing, leaving only a handful of late diners and the man at table 12. He ate slowly, methodically, occasionally pausing to take a phone call or send a text. The security guards had been joined by a third man, younger, who leaned close to whisper something. I watched from the corner of my eye as his expression darkened, his jaw clenching. The younger man backed away quickly, properly chastened. It was nearly 11 when he finally pushed back his plate. I approached cautiously, hyper-aware of every step. How was everything? Adequate. Not a compliment, but not a complaint either. I took the plate, noticed he'd eaten every bite, and felt a small surge of relief. Maybe I'd make it through this night without incident after all. "Would you care for dessert? Our tiramisu is exceptional." "No." He pulled out his wallet, thick black leather, and extracted several bills without looking at them. This should cover it. I glanced down at the money and felt my stomach flip. It was at least 3 times the cost of the meal. More money than I usually made in tips for an entire week. "Sir, this is too much. It's for your discretion." His eyes met mine again, and this time there was no mistaking the warning in them. "Regarding the photograph, and anything else you might have noticed tonight." Oh no. This wasn't a tip. This was hush money. My pride reared up, hot and sharp. I was poor, yes. Struggling, yes. But I don't need payment for basic decency, I heard myself say, even as a voice in my head screamed at me to shut up, take the money and walk away. That woman shouldn't have been taking pictures. I would have stopped her regardless. Silence. Heavy and dangerous. The security guards had gone very still. Even the classical music seemed to fade into the background. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. "You're refusing money. I'm refusing payment for doing the right thing." My voice was steady, even though my knees felt like water. "There's a difference." A long moment passed, then another. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, could feel sweat beginning to bead at my hairline. Finally, he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Nothing about this man seemed capable of warmth, but it held a hint of something that might have been respect. Interesting. He stood, and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Up close, he was even taller than I'd thought, radiating a kind of controlled power that made the air feel thin. "What's your full name, Sophia?" Every instinct screamed at me not to answer. But I'd already committed to this path, hadn't I? Already chosen pride over sense. "Sophia Martinez." He repeated it slowly, as if committing it to memory. Tell me, Sophia Martinez, how long have you worked here? 3 months. And before that? I don't see how that's relevant. Another smile, slightly wider this time. No, I suppose you don't. He shrugged into his jacket with fluid grace, and I caught a glimpse of something beneath it. A shoulder holster, the butt of a gun just visible. My mouth went dry. He buttoned his jacket, covering the weapon, and picked up the bills I'd refused. For a moment, I thought he might try to hand them to me again, force the issue. Instead, he folded them carefully and slipped them back into his wallet. "You're principled," he said, more statement than question. "That's rare, especially in a place like this. I'm just doing my job." "No." He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to retreat. "You're doing much more than that, whether you realize it or not." Before I could process what that meant, he moved past me toward the exit. The security guards fell into formation around him, a well-rehearsed choreography of protection and intimidation. At the door, he paused and looked back. Our eyes met across the now empty restaurant, and I felt that flutter again, fear mixed with something electric, something dangerous. "Sophia Martinez," he said, loud enough for me to hear, but soft enough that no one else would. "I'll remember that name." Then he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of his cologne and a feeling in my gut that my life had just changed in ways I couldn't begin to understand. Tony appeared at my elbow the moment the door closed. "What did you say to him?" "Nothing. I just served him dinner." "He left without paying." My heart stopped. "What?" "No, But when I checked the table, the bills were gone." "Of course they were. He'd taken them back." "Sophia, do you have any idea who that was?" I shook my head, but Tony's expression told me everything I needed to know. "That was Dante Moretti, the Dante Moretti." Tony's face had gone pale. "And you spoke to him. You stopped him from being photographed." The name meant nothing to me, but the way Tony said it, like speaking a curse, made my blood run cold. "Who is he?" Tony looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "He owns half this city, Sophia. And the other half is smart enough to stay out of his way." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Jesus, I need a drink." He walked away, muttering to himself, leaving me alone in the empty dining room. I should have felt relieved. The difficult customer was gone. I'd survived the night. Tomorrow everything would go back to normal. But as I began the closing routine, wiping down tables, refilling salt shakers, my mind kept returning to those dark eyes, that measured voice, the way he'd said my name like it was something worth remembering. I'll remember that name. It sounded less like a promise and more like a threat, and deep in my bones, in that place where instinct lived, I knew that whatever had started tonight wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The restaurant was finally empty, except for the kitchen staff finishing cleanup when I collected my tips from the night. Minus the money he'd tried to give me, the money I'd refused, it was still a decent take. Enough to cover my rent at least, enough to keep the lights on for another month. I changed out of my work clothes in the cramped employee bathroom, pulling on jeans and a faded sweater, and stepped out into the December night. The cold hit me immediately, cutting through my thin jacket. I should have bought a better coat, but there was always something else that needed the money more urgently. The street was quiet, most of the nearby restaurants already closed, their windows dark. My bus stop was 3 blocks away, and I started walking, my feet still aching from the long shift. I was halfway there when I heard it, the low purr of an expensive engine idling nearby. I told myself it was nothing, told myself to keep walking. But when I glanced over my shoulder, I saw it. A black SUV with tinted windows, parked against the curb, its engine running. Watching. Waiting. I walked faster, my breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The bus stop seemed miles away now, each step echoing too loudly on the empty sidewalk. Behind me, I heard the SUV's engine rev slightly, then the soft crunch of tires rolling forward. It was following me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked up my pace, not quite running, but close. The rational part of my brain tried to calm the rising panic. It was probably nothing, just a coincidence, maybe someone looking for an address. But the primal part, the part that had kept humans alive for millennia, was screaming at me to run. The SUV kept pace with me, maintaining the same careful distance. Not threatening exactly, but present, watchful. I reached the bus stop and positioned myself under the streetlight, as if the weak yellow glow could offer some protection. My phone was in my hand now, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. I didn't look at the SUV directly, but I could see it in my peripheral vision, a dark shape against the darker street. The passenger window rolled down with a soft mechanical whisper. "Miss Martinez." The voice was smooth, professional, and definitely not Dante Moretti's. "Mr. Moretti has requested that we ensure you arrive home safely." I turned to face the SUV, keeping several feet between us. The man in the passenger seat was one of the security guards from the restaurant, the lean one with alert eyes. In the driver's seat, I could make out the shape of the other guard, the one built like a wall. "I'm fine," I called back, proud that my voice didn't shake. "I take the bus every night." "Not tonight, you don't. It wasn't a request. Mr. Moretti was very clear about his instructions. "Well, you can tell Mr. Moretti that I don't need—" He anticipated you might say that. The guard's expression didn't change, but something in his tone suggested this was a conversation he'd been prepared for. He also said to remind you that it's below freezing. The next bus doesn't arrive for 43 minutes, and there have been 3 muggings in this area in the past 2 weeks. I hugged my thin jacket closer, hating that he was right about the cold. How does he know when the next bus comes? Mr. Moretti knows a great many things. The guard gestured to the back seat. "Please, Miss Martinez. We're simply ensuring your safety, nothing more." Every instinct told me to refuse, to assert my independence, to prove I didn't need anyone's help, especially not from a man who apparently owned half the city through means I didn't want to think about too closely. But it was cold, and I was exhausted, and the thought of standing in the freezing wind for nearly an hour made my bones ache. Fine. I crossed to the SUV, yanked open the back door, and slid inside before I could change my mind. But just this once. The interior smelled of leather, and that same cologne from earlier, faint but unmistakable. The seats were heated, and despite my determination to remain unaffected, I couldn't suppress a small sigh of relief as warmth seeped into my frozen muscles. "Address?" the driver asked, his voice a deep rumble. I gave him my address, a 4th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that was politely called transitional, and more accurately described as dangerous after dark. As we pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of my bus appearing in the distance, right on schedule despite what the guard had said. The ride passed in silence. I stared out the window, watching the city transform from the polished downtown area to gradually rougher streets. The guards didn't speak to each other or to me. Their attention focused entirely on the road and their surroundings. I noticed the driver's eyes constantly checking the mirrors, the way the passenger kept one hand near his jacket. Near a weapon, I realized with a chill. When we finally pulled up in front of my building, a shabby brick structure with a flickering entrance light and graffiti decorating the lower walls, the contrast to Dante Moretti's world couldn't have been starker. I saw the guards exchange a glance, something passing between them that I couldn't interpret. "Thank you," I said stiffly, reaching for the door handle. "Miss Martinez." The passenger guard turned to face me fully for the first time. His face was harder than I'd realized, marked with a thin scar along his jawline. "A word of advice, if I may." I waited, hand frozen on the handle. "Mr. Moretti doesn't often take an interest in people." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "When he does, it's rarely temporary. Whatever happened tonight at the restaurant, it would be wise to remember that. Nothing happened. I just stopped someone from taking his picture." "Exactly." The guard's expression was unreadable. "You protected him without being asked, without expecting payment. That's not something he's accustomed to. I was just doing my job." "No, Miss Martinez. You were doing much more than that, whether you understand it or not." He echoed his employer's words from earlier, and the repetition sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "Be careful. Dante Moretti's attention can be a blessing or a curse. Sometimes both." Before I could respond, he had turned back around, dismissing me as effectively as his boss had. I climbed out of the SUV and hurried to my building's entrance, fumbling with my keys. I didn't look back until I heard them drive away, the expensive engine fading into the night sounds of the city. Inside my apartment, I locked the door, checked it twice, then collapsed onto my threadbare couch. The space was small, a studio with a kitchenette, a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in, and windows that rattled when the wind blew. But it was mine. I'd fought for every inch of it, worked 3 jobs to afford the deposit, and I was proud of it, even if it couldn't have fit in Dante Moretti's coat closet. I kicked off my shoes and pulled out my laptop, a 5-year-old model that took forever to boot up. While it wheezed to life, I changed into pajamas and made myself a cup of instant ramen, the cheapest comfort food I could afford. Finally, unable to resist anymore, I opened a browser and typed in his name, Dante Moretti. The results flooded my screen, and with each article I read, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. He wasn't just wealthy. He wasn't just powerful. Dante Moretti was the head of one of the oldest crime families on the East Coast. His empire spanned legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate, construction, and less legitimate ones that the articles only hinted at: money laundering, extortion, connections to politicians and judges that ran so deep they'd become invisible. There were photos of him at charity galas, always in impeccable suits, always surrounded by equally powerful people. Photos of him leaving courthouses after cases that somehow never stuck. Photos of his father's funeral 3 years ago, where Dante had stood stone-faced as hundreds of mourners paid their respects to a man the FBI had been investigating for decades. The articles painted him as untouchable, dangerous. A man who commanded absolute loyalty and dealt with betrayal in ways that ensured it never happened twice. And I had refused his money, had spoken to him like he was just another difficult customer, had inadvertently protected him from something he probably would have handled himself in a much more permanent way. I closed the laptop, my ramen forgotten and growing cold. What have I done? Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, alternating between replaying the evening in my mind and telling myself I was overreacting. Tomorrow I'd go to work, and everything would be normal. He'd forget about me. I was nobody, after all, just a waitress who'd happened to be in the right place at the right time. Except his words kept echoing in my head. I'll remember that name. The next morning arrived too soon, dragging me from fitful dreams into harsh reality. I went through my routine on autopilot. Shower in the cramped bathroom, instant coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard, the same jeans and sweater from last night because I hadn't done laundry yet. I had the day shift at Stella's, which meant I'd be dealing with the lunch crowd. Less formal than dinner, fewer VIPs, more tourists and business lunches. Safer, I told myself. Normal. The walk to the bus stop felt different in daylight. Less threatening. The street looked shabby but benign, the graffiti almost artistic in the morning sun. I told myself I'd overreacted last night. Let my imagination run wild. Dante Moretti had more important things to worry about than a waitress who'd done her job. The restaurant was already bustling when I arrived. Marco, the maitre d', barely glanced at me as I clocked in, and Tony was too busy managing the kitchen prep to mention the previous night. Maybe everyone had already forgotten. Maybe it had been just another evening after all. I tied on my apron, grabbed my notepad, and stepped onto the floor. The lunch shift passed in its usual blur. Orders and refills, questions about gluten-free options and whether the sauce was too spicy. I fell into the rhythm of it, let the routine soothe my frayed nerves. By the time 2 o'clock rolled around, I'd almost convinced myself that everything was fine. Then Marco appeared at my elbow, his face pale and drawn. Sophia, private section. Table 12. The world tilted slightly, but I thought, the private section isn't open for lunch. It is today. Marco's voice was tight. He requested you specifically. My mouth went dry. He's here? Has been for 20 minutes. Waiting. Marco grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Whatever you did last night, fix it. Apologize. Do whatever he wants. We cannot afford to lose his patronage. He released me and hurried away, leaving me standing frozen in the middle of the dining room. I could leave. Could grab my coat and walk out and never come back. Find another job, another restaurant, put as much distance as possible between myself and Dante Moretti. But I needed this job, needed the money. And more than that, something stubborn in me refused to run. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd protected his privacy, refused payment I didn't earn. If that had somehow offended him, then he could deal with his offense like a rational human being. Even if, according to everything I'd read last night, rational wasn't exactly his defining characteristic. I straightened my apron, checked my reflection in the brass panel by the kitchen, hair pulled back neatly, minimal makeup, professional smile firmly in place, and walked toward the private section. He sat in the same seat as yesterday, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 men in expensive suits flanked him, engaged in what looked like an intense discussion. Papers were spread across the table, and I caught glimpses of numbers, contracts, official-looking seals. The same security guards from last night stood nearby, and I recognized the driver who'd spoken to me. His eyes tracked my approach, and something flickered in his expression. Warning? Sympathy? Before his face returned to professional blankness. I approached the table, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. Good afternoon. Welcome back to Stella's. My voice came out steadier than I'd expected. Can I start you gentlemen with something to drink? Dante looked up from the documents, and those dark eyes locked onto mine with the same unsettling intensity as before. But this time, something was different. There was a slight curve to his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close. Sophia. He said my name like he'd been practicing it. Right on time. I'm sorry? I made a reservation for 12:30. You arrived at your shift at 11:45. Marco informed me you'd need approximately 2 hours to handle your other tables before being available. He glanced at his watch, a different one than yesterday, but equally expensive. Which brings us to now. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. He'd planned this. Timed it. Arranged for me to be his server again. Yes, of course. What can I get you? We'll start with the Chianti, 2018. He gestured to the other men. And 3 orders of the pasta carbonara. Tell Vincenzo to make it properly this time. None of that cream nonsense Americans seem to prefer. I scribbled the order, acutely aware that the other 2 men were watching me with open curiosity. They were younger than Dante, probably in their mid-30s, with the same expensive suits and calculating eyes. Right away, sir. Sit. I froze halfway through turning away. Excuse me? Sit down, Sophia. It wasn't a request. He gestured to an empty chair. My associates and I need to discuss something with you. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to maintain professional distance, to not get any more tangled in whatever this was. But Marco's desperate face flashed through my mind, along with my unpaid rent and the electricity bill sitting on my kitchen counter. I sat. One of the men leaned back, studying me with open amusement. This is the girl? He had a thick Italian accent, thicker than Dante's. The one who refused your money? This is her. Dante's attention never left my face. Sophia Martinez. 26 years old, works 40-hour weeks at Stella's plus weekend shifts at a coffee shop in the University District. No family in the city. Moved here 2 years ago from Arizona. My blood turned to ice. How do you... I told you. I know a great many things. He leaned forward slightly, and I caught that scent again, cologne mixed with something uniquely him. The question is, what do I not yet know? I don't understand. Your file says you moved here after dropping out of college. Full scholarship to Arizona State, studying business administration. 3 semesters completed before you left. His eyes narrowed slightly. Why? That's none of your business. The other 2 men exchanged glances, clearly shocked that anyone would speak to Dante Moretti that way. But he just smiled, and this time it reached his eyes, transforming his face from forbidding to something almost handsome. Perhaps not. But I'm making it my business. He gestured to one of the men. Marco, show her. The man called Marco, not the maitre d', someone else entirely, pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. I looked down and felt the world drop away. It was a picture of a man I hadn't seen in over a year. Dark hair, charming smile, the kind of face that made people trust him instantly. The kind of face that had lied to me, stolen from me, and disappeared before I could even begin to understand what had happened. Danielle Russo, Dante said quietly. Also known as Danny Ross, Daniel Rodriguez, and at least 4 other names we've identified. Con artist, thief, and I believe, an acquaintance of yours? My hands were shaking. I clasped them together in my lap, refusing to let him see how much this affected me. Don't lie to me, Sophia. His voice was still quiet, but there was steel beneath it now. I've had people looking into you since last night. The timeline matches perfectly. You left school, left Arizona, and came here right after Daniel Russo cleaned out your bank account and stole your identity. Am I correct? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The memory of that time crashed over me. Discovering my account empty, finding out he'd taken loans in my name, maxed out credit cards I didn't know I had. The police had been sympathetic, but ultimately useless. He'd disappeared like smoke, and I'd been left with nothing but debt and shame. Why? I finally managed. Why do you care about some con artist who stole from a college student? Because Daniel Russo didn't just steal from you, Sophia. Dante's expression hardened, and for the first time I saw real anger there. 2 months after he left you in Arizona, he showed up here. He conned his way into the confidence of someone I care about, convinced them to invest in a fake business venture. When it all came crashing down, that person, they didn't recover. The shame of being fooled was too much. He stopped, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected. Grief, raw and barely concealed. My aunt, he said quietly. She was a smart woman, strong. But Russo knew exactly which lies to tell, exactly how to make her believe. She killed herself 3 weeks after he disappeared with her money. The room went silent. Even the security guards seemed to have stopped breathing. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for something that wasn't your fault. Dante's voice was cold again, the brief glimpse of vulnerability gone. But now you understand why I'm interested in you. You're one of the few people who can identify Daniel Russo on sight. One of the few who knows his methods, his patterns. And I need that knowledge. Understanding dawned, cold and heavy. You want me to help you find him. I want you to help me destroy him. Dante leaned back, his expression unreadable once more. I've been tracking him for months. I know he's back in the city. I know he's planning something big. But I need someone he won't recognize as a threat. Someone he might approach again, thinking she's an easy mark. You want to use me as bait. I want to offer you a choice. He pulled out a small card, cream-colored, expensive stock, and slid it across the table. Work with me. Help me find Daniel Russo, and I'll ensure that everything he took from you is returned, plus compensation for your time. I looked at the card. It was blank, except for a phone number embossed in gold, and if I refuse, then you refuse. Dante stood, buttoning his jacket. I won't force you, Sophia. I'm many things, but I don't coerce innocent people into helping me. You'll go back to your life, and I'll find another way. He started to walk away, his associates gathering the papers from the table. I should have let him go, should have stayed silent, kept my head down, continued my simple, difficult, but uncomplicated life. Instead, I heard myself say, he destroyed more than my credit. Dante stopped, turning back to face me. I stood, the card clutched in my hand. He made me doubt everything, my judgment, my intelligence, my worth. I dropped out of school not just because of the money, but because I couldn't face anyone after being so spectacularly stupid. So yes, Mr. Moretti, I want him found. I want him held accountable, but not because you're paying me. Then why? Because maybe if I help take him down, I can finally stop feeling like a victim. Something shifted in his expression, respect perhaps, or recognition. He extended his hand. Then we have a deal. I looked at his hand for a long moment. This was it, the point of no return. If I shook his hand, I'd be stepping into his world, a world of violence and power and things I'd only read about in those late-night articles. But I'd been powerless for too long, invisible for too long. I reached out and took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, his hand engulfing mine completely. For a moment, we stood there, connected, and I felt the weight of what I'd just agreed to settle over me like a coat made of shadows. Don't make me regret this, I said quietly. I could say the same to you, but there was no threat in his voice. If anything, he sounded almost pleased. My driver will pick you up tonight after your shift. We have work to do. He released my hand and walked away, his associates and guards falling into formation around him. I watched them leave, my hand still tingling where he'd touched it. What had I just done? The rest of my shift passed in a haze. I went through the motions, taking orders, serving food, smiling at customers. But my mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation over and over. I'd agreed to help a mafia boss hunt down the man who'd destroyed my life. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was insane, that I should call the police, run far away, pretend this had never happened. But the other part, the part that still woke up some nights in a cold sweat, remembering Daniel's charming smile and empty promises, that part wanted justice, or maybe revenge. I wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. Tony pulled me aside as I was clearing my last table. What did Moretti want? Just lunch. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. But what else could I say? Oh, he wants me to help him track down a con artist who ruined my life and killed his aunt. Nothing important. Tony's expression suggested he didn't believe me, but he didn't push. Be careful, Sophia. Men like that, they don't do anything without a reason. And their reasons are rarely good for people like us. I know. But did I? Did I really understand what I was getting into? The black SUV was waiting when I stepped outside at 11. Same vehicle, same guards. But this time, when I slid into the back seat, I wasn't alone. Dante sat in the corner, his jacket removed, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were surprisingly muscular. He was reading something on his phone, his expression concentrated, and didn't look up when I entered. "Where are we going?" I asked, as the SUV pulled away from the curb. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption." He finally glanced at me, and in the dim interior light, his features seemed softer somehow, less intimidating. "Have you eaten?" "I had something at work." "That's not what I asked." I hesitated. The truth was I'd been too nervous to eat, my stomach in knots all afternoon. "No, not really." He said something in Italian to the driver, too quick for me to catch. The SUV changed direction, heading toward a part of the city I rarely visited, where the buildings were taller, the streets cleaner, the people wealthier. We pulled up in front of a high-rise apartment building, all glass and steel and doormen in uniforms. Dante exited first, and I followed, feeling desperately out of place in my work clothes and cheap jacket. The doorman greeted him by name, holding the door with a respectful nod that suggested this was routine. The elevator was mirrored and silent, ascending so smoothly I barely felt the movement. Dante stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell that intoxicating cologne. He was taller than I'd realized. I barely reached his shoulder, even in my sensible work shoes. "This is your building?" I asked, just to break the silence. "One of them." He didn't elaborate. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, the lights twinkling like fallen stars. The space was enormous, minimalist furniture in dark leather and chrome, abstract art on the walls, everything expensive and tasteful and utterly impersonal. "Make yourself comfortable," Dante said, shrugging off his jacket and draping it over a chair. "I'll order food." "You don't have to. Sophia." He turned to face me, and his expression was unexpectedly gentle. "You're working for me now. That means I ensure you're taken care of. It's not charity, it's practicality. I need you sharp, focused. You can't be either on an empty stomach." I wanted to argue, but my traitorous stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. Dante's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Sit. Please." I perched on the edge of a leather sofa that probably cost more than my annual rent, while he made a phone call in rapid Italian. Within 20 minutes, there was a discreet knock at the door, and the security guard, the one who'd warned me last night, entered carrying bags that smelled like heaven. Dante set out the food on the dining table. Fresh pasta, grilled vegetables, crusty bread still warm from the oven, and a bottle of wine that looked expensive enough to make me nervous. "I don't usually drink," I said as he poured 2 glasses. Tonight you do. You're going to need it. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was incredible. Nothing like the reheated leftovers and instant meals I usually survived on. I tried to eat slowly, maintain some dignity, but I was hungrier than I'd realized. Better? Dante asked, watching me over the rim of his wine glass. Yes, thank you, he nodded, then stood and walked to a sleek desk in the corner. When he returned, he carried a tablet and several manila folders. He set them on the table between us, and I saw Daniel's photograph clipped to the top folder. Tell me everything, Dante said, his voice businesslike now. Start from the beginning. How did you meet him? I took a long sip of wine, gathering my courage. I'd never told anyone the full story. It was too humiliating, too painful. But if I was going to do this, Dante needed to know everything. I met him at a coffee shop near campus. I was studying for finals, and he just started talking to me. Asked about my textbooks, my major. He said he was a financial consultant, working with tech startups. I laughed bitterly. I should have known it was too good to be true. This handsome, successful man, interested in a scholarship student working 2 part-time jobs. Go on. We dated for 3 months. He was perfect, attentive, generous, always knowing exactly what to say. He talked about our future together, about starting a business after I graduated. He convinced me that we needed to combine our finances, that it would be easier to manage our investments that way. I closed my eyes, the shame washing over me fresh and sharp. I gave him access to everything, my bank account, my student loan information, my social security number, and then, one morning, I woke up and he was gone. Everything was gone. Dante's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his wine glass. Did he ever mention family, friends, places he'd lived before? He said he was from New York originally, that his parents died when he was young, and he'd been on his own ever since. He talked about living in Chicago for a while, working in finance. I paused, remembering. He had this scar, right here. I touched my collarbone. He said it was from a car accident when he was a teenager. Dante made a note on the tablet. What about habits? Routines? What did he do in his free time? He liked expensive things. Always wore designer clothes, drove a nice car, a BMW, I think. He ate at upscale restaurants, talked about wine like he was an expert. But looking back, I trailed off, understanding dawning. It was all borrowed, wasn't it? Everything he showed me, everything he pretended to be, it was all stolen from someone else. Most likely. Dante pulled out another photograph, this one showing Daniel with a different woman, both of them laughing at some outdoor cafe. This was taken 6 weeks ago, 3 blocks from here. We've been tracking him since he resurfaced. I stared at the photo, at Daniel's familiar smile, the easy charm that had fooled me so completely. The woman beside him looked happy, trusting, just like I had been. Who is she? We don't know yet, but we're going to find out. Dante pulled up something on his tablet, showing me what looked like bank statements and property records. Daniel has been careful this time. No credit cards in his real name, no permanent address we can find, but he's made mistakes. Small ones, but mistakes nonetheless. He showed me a series of photographs, Daniel at different locations around the city, always well-dressed, always with different people. A restaurant, an art gallery, a charity gala. He's targeting wealthy socialites, I said, understanding. Just like he did with your aunt, yes. But he's gotten smarter. He changes his appearance slightly each time. Different haircut, glasses, sometimes facial hair. He never stays in one place long enough to establish a pattern. Dante looked at me intently. That's where you come in. I don't understand. If he's that careful, how am I supposed to help? Because you know him, Sophia. Not the surface he shows the world. You know the real man underneath. His tells, his preferences, the things he can't change no matter how many disguises he wears. Dante leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. I have all the resources in the world, but resources can't replace genuine knowledge. You've seen him without the mask. That's invaluable. I looked at the photographs again, studying Daniel's face in each one. Dante was right. There were subtle consistencies. The way he stood, slightly angled, always aware of exits. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes. The expensive watch he wore in every photo. Different styles, but always present. Always visible. He's vain, I said slowly. He can't help himself. Even when he's trying to disappear, he needs people to see him as successful, as important. Good. What else? I thought back to our time together, forcing myself past the pain to the details I'd tried to forget. He drinks scotch. Single malt, expensive. He claimed to be a connoisseur, but I think it was just another prop. And he's claustrophobic, hated elevators, always wanted to take the stairs, said it was for fitness, but I saw him panic once when we got stuck in an elevator for just a few seconds. Dante was making notes, his expression focused. This is exactly what I need. Keep going. We worked through the evening, Dante asking questions, and me dredging up memories I'd buried. The wine helped, loosening my tongue, making the painful recollections slightly more bearable. I told him about Daniel's preferences, his habits, the stories he'd told that might have contained fragments of truth, and slowly, I began to see it. Not just the investigation, but Dante himself. The way he listened intently to every word, treating my observations with respect, the careful notes he took, the connections he made. This wasn't just about revenge for him. It was personal, but it was also methodical, professional. It's late, he said finally, glancing at his watch. Marco will take you home. Marco, the guard, my head of security. He's been with me for 15 years. You can trust him. I stood, suddenly exhausted. The emotional toll of reliving those memories had drained me more than any physical labor. What happens next? I'll be in touch. In the meantime, keep your eyes open. If you see anything suspicious, anyone who reminds you of Daniel, call me immediately. He walked me to the elevator, and for a moment, we stood close together in the small space. And Sophia? Thank you for trusting me with this. I'm not sure I do trust you, I admitted, but I trust that you want Daniel stopped as much as I do. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or respect. That's honest at least. Fair enough. The elevator arrived and I stepped inside. As the doors began to close, Dante placed his hand against them, holding them open. One more thing. From now on, Marco or one of my other men will be watching you, for your protection. I don't need... Yes, you do. If Daniel is in the city, and if he suspects we're looking for him, you could be in danger. I won't have your safety compromised because of me. His tone left no room for argument. Consider it a condition of our agreement. The doors closed before I could respond, and I descended alone, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. The next few days fell into a strange new rhythm. I went to work, served tables, smiled at customers. But now, everywhere I went, I felt eyes watching me. Marco or one of Dante's other men was always nearby, never intrusive, but always present. A car parked across the street from my apartment. A customer at the coffee shop who nursed the same drink for hours. Someone browsing magazines at the convenience store while I bought groceries. At first, it made me nervous, this constant surveillance, but gradually, I began to feel something unexpected. Safe. For the first time since Daniel had destroyed my life, I didn't walk home afraid, didn't check over my shoulder every few steps. Someone was watching, yes, but they were watching for me, not at me. Dante called every evening at 9. The conversations were brief, professional. Had I seen anything unusual? Had anyone approached me? Did I remember any other details about Daniel? But sometimes, at the end of these calls, there would be a pause, a moment where neither of us spoke, where I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, and I wondered what he was thinking. On the 4th night, he asked a different question. How are you sleeping? I was curled on my couch, wrapped in a blanket against the draft that perpetually leaked through my windows. The question caught me off guard. Fine. Why? Don't lie to me, Sophia. Marco says your lights are on until 3, sometimes 4 in the morning. I felt a flash of irritation. Is he reporting everything I do? He's ensuring your safety. Answer the question. I sighed. I'm not sleeping well. Talking about Daniel, remembering everything. It brings back nightmares I thought I'd left behind. Silence on the other end. Then, I understand. After my aunt died, I didn't sleep for months. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Saw the disappointment in her eyes when she realized she'd been fooled. It was the most personal thing he'd shared with me, and the vulnerability in his voice made my chest tighten. How did you get past it? I haven't. I just learned to function without sleep. A pause. But you're not like me, Sophia. You shouldn't have to be. What does that mean? It means I'm sending you something. Don't argue. He hung up before I could respond. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole and saw Marco standing in the hallway, holding a small bag. When I opened the door, he handed it to me without a word and left. Inside was a bottle of expensive sleeping pills, the natural kind, herbal supplements, and a note in bold masculine handwriting. Take one. That's an order. DM. Despite everything, I smiled. Then I took the pill and slept through the night for the first time in a week. The breakthrough came on Friday evening. I was working the dinner shift when a man walked in who made every nerve in my body scream warning. He had Daniel's build, Daniel's way of moving, but his hair was different, darker, shorter, and he wore glasses that changed the shape of his face. I watched him from across the dining room as Marco seated him at a corner table, watched the way he surveyed the restaurant with practiced casualness. Watched him order wine with the kind of false expertise I remembered so well. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed Dante's number. He answered on the first ring. Sophia. He's here. At least I think it's him. Table 9. Dark hair. Glasses. But the way he moves... I ducked into the kitchen, lowering my voice. It's him. I'm almost certain. Stay calm. Don't approach him. I'm sending Marco in. He's outside. Act normal. What if I'm wrong? What if it's just someone who reminds me of him? Then we'll know soon enough. Trust your instincts, Sophia. They've been right so far. I returned to the floor, forcing myself to breathe normally. Marco entered moments later, dressed casually, taking a seat at the bar with a clear view of table 9. Our eyes met briefly, and he gave me the smallest nod. I served my other tables, but my attention kept drifting to the man at table 9. He was charming with his server, my coworker Jennifer, making her laugh, complimenting her earrings. Classic Daniel behavior, but I needed to be sure. When Jennifer went on break, I volunteered to cover her tables. My heart pounded as I approached table 9, my notepad clutched in sweaty hands. Good evening. Can I get you anything else? He looked up at me, and for a split second, so brief I might have imagined it, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Panic. Then it was gone, replaced by a polite smile. Just the check, thank you. But I'd seen it. That moment of fear before the mask slid back into place. Of course. I'll be right back with that. I walked away on shaking legs and immediately texted Dante. It's him. He recognized me. The response came instantly. Don't let him leave. We're 3 minutes out. 3 minutes. I had to stall him for 3 minutes. I processed his check slowly, my hands deliberately clumsy. When I brought it to the table, I fumbled with the receipt, dropping it on the floor. I'm so sorry. Let me get you another one. That's fine. Really. He was already standing, pulling out his wallet. No, I insist. It'll just take a moment. I hurried back to the computer, my pulse racing. 2 minutes. I needed 2 more minutes. When I returned with a new receipt, he was on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. He grabbed the receipt from my hand, threw down cash without counting it, and headed for the door. Marco was already moving, blocking his path subtly, pretending to stumble slightly into him. Sorry, man. Didn't see you there. It's fine. Excuse me. Daniel tried to push past, but Marco's bulk was effectively blocking the narrow passage between tables. Then the front door opened, and Dante walked in. He looked different than I'd ever seen him. Dangerous, predatory, every inch the mafia boss the articles described. His security flanked him, and the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Daniel saw him and went white. Going somewhere, Daniel? Dante's voice was quiet, but it carried. Or should I call you Danny? Or perhaps Daniel Rodriguez? I don't know what you're talking about. You have me confused with someone. Don't insult my intelligence. Dante moved closer, and I saw Daniel's hand twitch toward his pocket. Instantly, Marco had him by the wrist, twisting it behind his back with practiced efficiency. You made a mistake coming back to my city, Dante said, his face inches from Daniel's. An even bigger mistake touching my family. I never... Daniel's eyes were wild now, darting around the restaurant, looking for escape. You conned my aunt, took her money, took her dignity. She killed herself because of you. Dante's voice never rose, but the fury in it made my blood run cold. Did you think I wouldn't find you, that there was anywhere you could hide? Please, I can explain. You'll have plenty of time to explain. To me, and to some other people who are very interested in your activities. Dante nodded to Marco, who began steering Daniel toward the door. Then Dante's eyes found mine across the restaurant. Sophia, come here. I walked over on numb legs. Daniel looked at me, and I saw the moment he truly recognized me. The college student he'd left broken in Arizona. You, he whispered. You did this. No, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. You did this. To me, to Dante's aunt, to God knows how many others. I just helped make sure you couldn't do it anymore. Dante placed a hand on my shoulder. Warm, solid, grounding. You did well. They took Daniel away, Marco and the other guards surrounding him. The restaurant erupted in whispers, but Dante ignored them all, his attention focused entirely on me. Are you all right? I think so. Is it really over? The first part is. His hand moved from my shoulder to gently cup my face, tilting my head up to meet his eyes. The gesture was surprisingly tender, but now comes the difficult part. He'll be questioned. There will be legal proceedings. You'll need to testify about what he did to you. I can do that. I want to do that. I know you do. Something in his expression softened. You're stronger than you think, Sofia Martinez. Stronger than he ever gave you credit for. The warmth of his hand, the intensity of his gaze, it was too much. I stepped back, creating distance, and his hand fell away. What happens now? To him, I mean. He'll face justice, the kind that actually sticks. Dante's expression hardened again. I have evidence of dozens of his cons, connections to fraud investigations across multiple states. He won't see freedom for a very long time. Good. Take the rest of the night off. Marco will drive you home. I can't just leave my shift. I own this restaurant, Sophia. You can leave whenever I say you can. He said it matter-of-factly, without arrogance. Go home. Rest. You've earned it. I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to argue, but as I turned to go, he caught my wrist gently. Sophia, thank you. For everything. I looked at our connected hands, at the way his long fingers encircled my wrist so carefully, as if I were something fragile, something precious. You already said that. I know, but I mean it more now. He released me, stepping back into that professional distance. We'll talk tomorrow. Marco drove me home in silence. When we arrived at my building, he walked me to my door, something he'd never done before. You did good tonight, he said gruffly. Took guts, facing him like that. I had help. Still, not everyone could have done it. He paused at my door. Mr. Moretti, he doesn't let many people in, doesn't trust easily, but he trusts you. That's rare. I'm not sure why. I'm nobody. No, Marco said firmly. You're not. And the sooner you realize that, the better. He left before I could ask what he meant. Inside my apartment, I collapsed on the couch, my body shaking with delayed reaction. It was over. Daniel was caught. Justice, real justice, would finally happen. So why did I feel like something else was just beginning? My phone buzzed with a text from Dante. Sleep well. You've earned it. Then another message. And Sophia, you were never nobody. Not to me. I stared at the words until they blurred, something warm and terrifying unfurling in my chest. What was happening between us? And more importantly, What was I going to do about it? The days following Daniel's arrest should have brought relief, closure. Instead, they brought something I hadn't anticipated: emptiness. Without the search for Daniel consuming my thoughts, without the nightly phone calls from Dante discussing strategy, my life felt hollow. I went to work, served tables, returned to my apartment. The same routine I'd had before, but now it felt unbearably small, suffocating. Marco still appeared occasionally, a silent presence that I'd grown oddly comforting to see, but Dante himself had vanished. No calls, no texts, no unexpected appearances at the restaurant. I told myself it made sense. Our arrangement was finished. He'd gotten what he wanted, and I'd gotten justice. There was no reason for a man like Dante Moretti to remain in my life. But God, I missed him. Missed his voice on the phone, asking how I was sleeping. Missed the weight of his attention, the way he looked at me like I was something more than a struggling waitress. Missed the feeling of mattering to someone. A week passed. Then 2. I was closing the restaurant on a Tuesday night, the last one out as usual, when I found the envelope. It was propped against my locker in the employee break room. Thick cream-colored paper with my name written in that familiar bold handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a check, more money than I'd made in the past year. Enough to pay off every debt Daniel had left me with. Enough to go back to school, enough to start over properly, and a note. Sophia, this is what I owe you. What Daniel took from you, with interest. It's not charity. You earned every penny by helping bring him to justice. The investigation is complete. Daniel is facing charges in 3 states. He won't hurt anyone else. I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. I've been dealing with some business matters that required my full attention, but I thought about you. Every day. If you want to see me again, call the number on the card I gave you. If you don't, I'll understand. Either way, you deserve better than the life you've been living. Take the money. Start over. Be happy. DM. I read the note 3 times, my vision blurring with unshed tears. This was goodbye, a clean break. Everything tied up neatly, my debts paid, my life returned to me. So why did it feel like losing something irreplaceable? I looked at the check again. It would solve everything. Every problem, every worry, every sleepless night wondering how I'd make rent. I should have been grateful, relieved. Instead, I felt hollow. I pulled out my phone and stared at Dante's number, my thumb hovering over the call button. What would I even say? Thank you? I miss you? I don't want this to be over? The phone rang before I could decide, making me jump, but it wasn't Dante's number. It was Marco. Miss Martinez. His voice was tense. I need you to stay where you are. Lock the doors. Don't leave until I get there. My blood ran cold. What's wrong? Daniel made bail 2 hours ago. We just found out. He should still be in custody, but someone paid. We're trying to figure out who. Mr. Moretti is handling it, but until we locate Daniel again, you're not safe. He made bail? How is that possible? Someone with money and connections helped him. Someone who doesn't want him talking about his other clients. Marco's voice was grim. I'm 5 minutes away. Do not open the door for anyone but me. Understood? Understood. I hung up and quickly locked the restaurant's front door, my heart pounding. Daniel was free, and if he knew I'd helped Dante find him... The lights in the dining room suddenly went dark. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The breaker box was in the back. Had it tripped? Or had someone deliberately... Sophia. The voice came from the darkness near the kitchen. Familiar. Charming. Terrifying. I think we need to talk. Daniel stepped into the faint light from the street, and I saw that the charming mask was gone. His face was twisted with rage, his eyes cold and calculating. You ruined everything, he said, moving closer. I had it all set up. A new identity, new targets, a new life, and you destroyed it. You and that psychopath Moretti. I backed away, my hand fumbling for my phone. The police know you're here. They're on their way. No, they're not. I've been watching you, Sophia, learning your schedule. I know you close alone on Tuesdays. I know your guard dog Marco is across town right now, dealing with a little distraction I arranged. He smiled, and it was the same smile that had fooled me 2 years ago. I always was good at misdirection. What do you want? What do I want? He laughed, the sound brittle and wrong. I want my life back. I want the money I lost because of you. But since I can't have that, he pulled something from his jacket, a knife. I'll settle for making sure you can't hurt anyone else. Terror flooded through me, but underneath it was something else. Anger, fury at this man who'd taken so much from me and now wanted to take even more. You're pathetic, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, blaming me for the consequences of your own actions. You're a coward, Daniel. You always were. His face darkened. Shut up. You prey on vulnerable people because you can't compete with real men. You steal because you can't earn anything honestly. And now you're threatening me because you know Dante Moretti is going to destroy you. I said, shut up. He lunged forward, knife flashing. I grabbed a chair and swung it with all my strength. It connected with his arm, and the knife clattered to the floor. Daniel cursed, diving for it, but I was faster. I kicked it away and ran for the front door, my fingers fumbling with the lock. Behind me, I heard Daniel's footsteps, felt his hand grab my hair, yanking me backward. I screamed, driving my elbow into his stomach. He grunted but didn't let go. Then the front door exploded inward. Dante stood in the doorway, and he looked like death itself. His face was a mask of cold fury, his dark eyes blazing with a violence I'd only glimpsed before. Behind him, Marco and 3 other guards filled the entrance. Get your hands off her. Dante's voice was quiet, deadly. Daniel released me immediately, raising his hands. Look, I was just... Dante moved faster than I would have thought possible. One moment he was at the door, the next he had Daniel by the throat, slamming him against the wall with such force that pictures rattled on their hooks. You touched her. Each word was precisely enunciated, dripping with menace. You threatened her. After everything you've done, you came after the one person who showed you mercy by simply turning you in instead of letting me handle you my way. Please, Daniel choked out. I should kill you. Dante's hand tightened. I want to kill you. Do you understand that? The only thing stopping me is that she's watching. His eyes met mine over Daniel's shoulder, and I saw the barely controlled rage there, the desire for violence, but also concern, checking to make sure I was unharmed. Dante, I said softly, don't. He's not worth it. Something in my voice reached him. His hand loosened slightly, though he didn't release Daniel completely. Marco, call the police. Real charges this time. Attempted murder, assault, breaking and entering. Make sure Judge Romano handles it. He owes me a favor. Marco made the call while the other guards secured Daniel, who was sobbing now, all his bravado gone. Dante finally released him with a look of disgust and crossed to me. Did he hurt you? His hands moved over me, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. I'm fine. Just scared. You shouldn't have been alone. I should have. He stopped, his jaw clenching. This is my fault. I left you unprotected. You couldn't have known. I should have. I knew he was dangerous. I knew he had connections. He pulled me against his chest suddenly, his arms wrapping around me with fierce protectiveness. Dio, when Marco called and said he'd been misdirected, that you were alone. I melted into his embrace, feeling the rapid pound of his heart against my cheek. He'd been terrified. This powerful, dangerous man had been terrified for me. I'm okay, I whispered. You got here in time. He pulled back slightly, cupping my face in his hands. This ends now. Daniel goes away for good, and you... He hesitated, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. You stop being alone, if you'll let me. What does that mean? It means I've been a coward, worse than Daniel in some ways, because I knew what I wanted and was too afraid to take it. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, the gesture achingly tender. I told myself I was giving you space, letting you return to your normal life, but the truth is, I was scared. Scared that you'd realize what I am. A criminal, a violent man who lives in a world of darkness. Scared that you'd see me clearly and run. Dante, let me finish. Please. He took a shaky breath. You walked into my life by accident. Protected me without expecting anything in return. showed me a kind of integrity I'd forgotten existed, and then you trusted me, of all people, to help you find justice. You made me want to be the man you saw when you looked at me. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying that I don't want to let you go. I'm saying that the past 2 weeks without you have been hell. I'm saying... He leaned his forehead against mine, his eyes closing briefly. I'm saying I'm in love with you, Sophia Martinez. Completely. Irrevocably. And if you'll have me, knowing everything I am, everything I've done, I promise to spend the rest of my life protecting you, cherishing you, making sure you never have to face anything alone again. Tears spilled down my cheeks. You love me? Hopelessly. A small, vulnerable smile crossed his face. Tell me I haven't ruined this. Tell me you feel something too. I feel everything. I confessed. I've been miserable without you. I missed your calls, your presence, the way you make me feel like I matter, like I'm more than just... I gestured helplessly at myself. You are more. You're everything. He kissed me then, soft and reverent, like I was something precious. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion. Come home with me. Not for tonight, for always. Let me take care of you. Let me love you the way you deserve. I don't need your money, Dante. I know. That's why I love you. But let me give you these things anyway. Not because you need them, but because I need to give them. Because seeing you struggle, seeing you work yourself to exhaustion in that tiny apartment, it kills me. His hands framed my face again. Let me give you the life you should have had. The education Daniel took from you. The security you deserve. Not as payment, but as worship. Because that's what you are to me, Sophia. Something sacred. The police arrived then, taking statements and leading Daniel away in handcuffs. He looked broken, defeated. A far cry from the charming con artist who'd fooled so many. As they took him past us, he met my eyes one last time. I hope he's worth it, he spat. I looked at Dante, this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly tender man who'd given me back my power, my voice, my sense of self-worth, who looked at me like I'd hung the moon. He is, I said simply. After the police left, Dante drove me home himself. Not to my apartment, but to his penthouse. Marco and the other guards followed at a discreet distance, ever present but giving us privacy. In the elevator, Dante held my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. I meant what I said, about everything. I know. And I love you too. I think I have for a while. I just didn't want to admit it, because of what I am, because of what you represent. Power, danger. Everything I thought I should avoid, I turned to face him fully. But you're also kind and protective, and you see me in a way no one else ever has. You're complicated, Dante Moretti, and I think I'm okay with that. He smiled, a real smile, full of warmth and hope. Good. Because complicated is the one thing I can promise to always be. The penthouse was the same as before, but tonight it felt different. Warmer. More like a home than a showpiece. Dante made us tea, his movements domestic and surprisingly comfortable, and we sat on the couch overlooking the city lights. What happens now? I asked. Now? Now you move in here. Tomorrow we'll get your things from your apartment. Next week you enroll in school, any program you want, and every day after that, I wake up grateful that you gave me a chance I don't deserve. That's a lot of decisions. Too fast? Maybe. I leaned against him, feeling his arm come around me automatically. But also, perfect. I don't want to go back to that life, Dante. The struggling, the loneliness, the feeling invisible. With you, I feel alive. You are alive. Finally. He kissed the top of my head, and I'm going to spend every day making sure you know how extraordinary you are. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city below. Then Dante spoke again, his voice soft. My aunt, the one Daniel destroyed, she would have liked you. She was strong too, independent. She only trusted him because he was good at pretending to be someone worth trusting. Tell me about her. And he did. For hours, We talked. About his aunt, about his family, about the complicated legacy he'd inherited, and the man he was trying to become. I told him about my childhood, my dreams of business school, the person I'd been before Daniel, and the person I wanted to become now. As dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Dante pulled me closer. I know my world isn't easy. There will be danger, complications. Things about my business you're better off not knowing. But I promise you this, I will never lie to you. I will never take you for granted, and I will spend every day proving that your faith in me isn't misplaced. I believe you, I whispered. And I did. Against all logic, against all the warnings my rational mind was screaming, I believed him. Because actions spoke louder than words, and Dante had shown me through everything, the way he'd listened to me, protected me, valued my input, that I mattered to him. Not as a possession, not as a trophy, but as an equal, a partner. Move in with me, he said again. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Build a life with me, Sophia. Let me prove every day that you made the right choice. I looked around the penthouse, at the life he was offering, safety, security, love, everything I'd stopped believing I deserved. Yes, I said finally. Yes, I'll move in with you. His smile could have lit the entire city. 3 months later, I stood in the same restaurant where everything had begun, but now I wasn't wearing an apron. I wore a designer dress Dante had insisted on buying me, my hair styled professionally, my hand clasped in his as we celebrated the opening of my own business. A consulting firm for fraud victims, funded by Dante and supported by his legal team. Daniel was serving 15 years in federal prison. The investigation had uncovered dozens of victims, millions in fraud. Justice, real and complete. Marco stood near the door, a proud smile on his scarred face. Tony, my former manager, raised a glass in toast. Even Vincenzo had emerged from the kitchen to wish me well, but my attention was on Dante, on the man who'd taken a chance on a struggling waitress and seen someone worth loving, someone worth fighting for. Happy? He asked, pulling me close. Terrified, I admitted, but yes, incredibly happy. Good. He kissed me softly, unmindful of the crowd, because this is just the beginning, amore mio. Your whole life is ahead of you, and I get to be part of it. I looked around at everything I'd built, not with his money but with his support, his belief in me, his love. I'd started as someone invisible, someone who expected nothing and received less. But Dante had seen me, really seen me. And in his eyes, I'd learned to see myself, not as a victim, not as a struggling waitress, but as Sophia Martinez, strong, capable, worthy of love. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. I love you, I told him. The word's easier now. Natural. I love you too. His arms tightened around me. Forever, if you'll have me. Forever, I agreed. And as the party continued around us, as our future stretched bright and uncertain ahead, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The waitress who'd caught a mafia boss's eye had become something more. Not because of him, but because of herself. And that was the greatest victory of all.